Pleasure to introduce today's webinar chair, Mr. Matthew Alvarez, Project Manager from AELP. Matt, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and again, welcome to the Working Creatively to Engage Learners Through Schools webinar. We're delighted to have our facilitator that joins us from Aspire Learning and Development, Anna Morrison, to deliver this webinar today. We'd like to remind you or make you aware that this webinar forms part of a substantial program that's been on offer over the last 2 years to support providers and endpoint assessment organisations with the delivery and assessment within the apprenticeship sector, and it's called the Future Apprenticeship Support Programme. It's being commissioned by DFE, and AELP is the prime contractor work with ETF, the Education and Training Foundation, to work with organisations around this sector to identify and consider the content that prepares and establishes strong working practices in the delivery of management and delivery within apprenticeships. If you want to find out more that's coming up, and as we're in the last month, there's some excellent webinars coming up during March. Go to the futureapprenticeships.org.uk website, all one word, Future Apprenticeships, or keep an eye on the AELP countdown, which is out every week, or our new in the Insider, which is now out every 2 months and focusing on a theme or topic each edition. The last month's was about recruitment, to keep you updated on any of the final webinars, workshops and seminars that are occurring. So back to today. There's going to be opportunities, as it's been mentioned, for questions at the end of the session. If we can keep it to the subject matter that this is on about, that would be very much appreciated. We'll attempt to answer all or as many of the questions as possible, but if we don't, as it said, we will take them away and respond separately, and we'll provide all the Q&A after the event. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Anna Morrison from Aspire Learning and Development. So please get involved, ask questions, and over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for taking the time to join us on this morning's webinar. My name is Anna Morrison. One of my hats is with Aspire Learning and Development, working alongside Alison Sumpter to develop training programs and webinars for training providers in the sector. But I kind of wear lots of other hats in the sector as well. So you may have come across me in different guises, which I'll cover off in a few minutes. So our discussions today, what I'm going to cover is a little bit about my background and why I've been asked to present on this for you this morning. Then we're going to go into just looking at setting the scene around kind of what's happening with schools around the new careers policy and the Baker Clause and other school-based programs that you can link in with as training providers. Then I'm going to share some of my experience of engaging with schools, some of the most effective techniques that I've seen providers using or kind of where it really works very well with schools, explaining the new Young Apprentice Ambassador Network and how your apprentices can get involved, schools as a route to parents, and then also how your apprentices can act as ambassadors going forward. And then rounding up, we're going to just cover off some top tips and actions to take away. So hopefully that meets your expectations of what we're going to do this morning. So this is me. So about me. Well, I've been working in the apprenticeship sector for nearly 20 years now. I've had various roles, including working at an FE college, managing an apprenticeship contract, working on a provider network alongside the Learning and Skills Council. And one of my roles currently is to manage the Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire and Milton Keynes provider network. So I'm in contact with training providers the whole time. But I'm also the director of Amazing Apprenticeships. So Amazing Apprenticeships is the official communications channel into schools across England, working really closely with the National Apprenticeship Service. And some of the pictures that I've put up on the screen for you today show an event that we held last week as part of National Apprenticeship Week on International Women's Day, where we brought together a selection of teachers from across England and apprentices to really look at tackling some school-based issues around how can we work with parents more effectively and how can we get more females involved in STEM apprenticeships. So as well as doing some of the strategy and policy stuff, I really love kind of rolling my sleeves up literally and kind of sitting down with teachers and helping to come up with ideas and design resources that are going to help them to be able to pass on the positive apprenticeship message in their schools. So as part of that, I speak to teachers pretty much every day. Most of my family are teachers, my brothers and sisters and parents, and I'm really passionate about this. I'm really passionate about if we can get the schools piece right, or at least better than it has been in previous years, then we can give teachers confidence to be having those conversations on a daily basis with potential apprentices so that all learners are given equal access to understand all of their options. So that's really kind of my mission. So we're going to launch a couple of polls as we go through the presentation this morning. But just before we start, I was really interested to know what percentage of your apprenticeship learners currently are school leavers. So Jill is launching that poll for me. So if I can ask you on the screen to select your choices, so whether it's 0 to 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100, or no idea. And there's no shame in having no idea either. So just so that we can get a feel for where people are at in terms of the importance of engaging with schools as part of your growth strategy. So we'll just give a few minutes for the votes to come in. And then once Jill's happy that we've got enough votes, then she'll be able to launch the results for us on the screen. Okay, so there we go. So we can see that we're all around the middle, really. So there's 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100, with 2 at 27% and 1 at 23%. Only a small number have got no idea, and a small number have got 0 to 25%. So I think what that indicates to us is that being able to attract school leavers into apprenticeships needs to be a priority for providers. And I completely understand that. What we need to look at is the most effective ways to do that. We know that through the apprenticeship reforms that we've now really got two main markets of apprenticeships. We've got new recruits, so those are often school leavers, and it's where an employer could create a new vacancy. Obviously, it's not always a school leaver. Apprentices can be of any age, but typically that is what we find. And then the other market is the existing workforce, so where an employer will be looking at their existing employees and looking at the kind of training and development needs of their workforce and where they might be able to create apprenticeship opportunities. But for the purposes of today, we're thinking new recruits and we're thinking school leavers. So in my experience, I meet loads of training providers who will say, oh, we really need to get into schools, we really need to do more. And I think the trick to getting this really right is to first of all stop and say, why? Why do you need to get into school, and what is the driver for your organisation going to be? So if you're it's expensive. It can be expensive to send your staff in to speak at school events, and it can be really time consuming as well. And what's the impact or the outcome that you expect to see from that activity? So sometimes providers will say, well, look, it's just awareness raising and making noise about apprenticeships, and we understand the apprenticeship landscape and we want to go in and share that information and intelligence with students and inspire them, which is brilliant. But actually, from a business point of view, it would be even better if you could look at how that might translate into actual apprenticeship starts. And that can be quite difficult, but you know, everyone's kind of up against it at the moment in terms of funding and capacity. So we've got to be really smart, and we've got to think, well, if we are going into schools, how can we get the most out of it? So let's just pause slightly and look at the careers landscape. We, in December, had the new careers strategy that was launched. We've got a link for you there if you haven't already seen it. And through this new careers strategy, we saw a number of indicators. I've just summarised some of them for you. So they really want young people to be able to understand the range of opportunities that are open to them. And they want young people to be able to understand from employers and to have first-hand experience of the skills that employers think they need for the workplace. So, of course, they removed mandatory work experience some time ago, but I think first-hand experience is going to come back, and also T-levels, which we're not covering today, but T-levels have a huge emphasis on work experience. So we should see a shift back towards work experience, I think. Then they want all young people to receive an excellent programme of advice and guidance delivered by individuals with the right skills and experience. So high quality CEIAG. I don't think this is anything new, but what they are saying is it's got to be delivered by individuals with the right skills and experience. And this is where we're starting to see a lot more employers going back into schools to talk about careers information. They want everyone to receive support that's tailored to their circumstances. That's regardless of what level they're at or what their career aspirations might be. We really need to be able to cover everything from traineeships to degree apprenticeships in our world. And of course, there's a whole range of other career discussions that should be happening. And they want everyone to receive the information that they need to understand the opportunities available. So good quality, timely information that means that young people and their families get the information that they need when they need it. So it's, you know, alongside the careers policy, then this came out in January. So the Baker Clause. Now, the Baker Clause was introduced by Lord Baker as part of the Education and Skills Act. The Baker Clause is statutory guidance. So by statutory, it means that you have to follow it unless there's a good reason not to. So this means that all of those schools and school types that are listed on the slide there, local authorities, community schools, foundation or voluntary schools, academies, pupil referral units, they all need to ensure that they are meeting this statutory requirement that's been set out through the Baker Clause. So first of all, this is what they have been expected to get in place by January this year. So we're already kind of in March, so this should have been in place in January. So schools need to ensure there's an opportunity for a range of education and training providers to access all pupils in years 8 to 13 for informing them about approved technical education qualifications or apprenticeships. And the way that schools are expected to do this in January is to publish a policy statement setting out the arrangements for provider access and ensuring that it's followed. So in its very simplest form, schools should somewhere on their website perhaps have a statement about if a provider wants to go in and talk to their pupils in years 8 to 13, this is how you should do it. So it could be a named individual with an email address, it could be a kind of a generic email address, but they should be able to make it clear how providers can do this. I think there was a bit of a worry that there was going to be a sudden rush of providers kind of all banging on the doors of schools saying, let us in, we need to speak to your students. But actually that doesn't seem to have really happened. For September this year, so just in 6 months' time, every school will need to appoint a named person to the role of careers leader to lead their careers programme. Now, loads of schools have already got a careers leader, but a lot of schools still don't. So this is kind of a lesson to the ones that don't. And you may have picked up yesterday, I saw it kind of late last night on Twitter, that the draft implementation plan came out yesterday from the Careers and Enterprise Company. And within this, that's where they talk about a £4 million fund for schools to give 500 bursaries to schools to support them in the development of this careers leader training programme. So that works out at about £8,000 per school. So that draft implementation plan came out yesterday and they are consulting on it. So they're interested in finding out feedback from the sector, from schools and training providers about that. Then by September, every school is going to be expected to publish details of their careers programmes for young people and their parents. So I imagine we would see this on the website. Then throughout 18 and 19, there will be this careers leader training that's going to be funded through the Careers and Enterprise Company for 500 schools and colleges. So there's a bit of investment going in and there's a bit of tightening up on the expectations around schools. This has been communicated to schools through the Department for Education. I think we're yet to see it come through from an Ofsted point of view, but someone's going to be needing to kind of check that schools have done this and have got it in place. But I think to begin with, we're going more with carrot than stick. So it's kind of encouraging schools to come forward and create opportunities for their students to be told about all of their post-16 and post-18 options. So I wanted to tell you a bit about some of the national school support programs that sit alongside the careers strategy and some of the work that's already going on, because it strikes me that the trick for providers in making sure that any time that you spend in schools is maximised and that you're getting the most for your money and your investment is by linking in with school support programs. But you may not know about the kind of programs that are already out there. So these are all things that I'm involved in, kind of regardless of which hat I'm wearing. So I'll talk you through it. The Apprenticeship Support and Knowledge for Schools programme was launched in 2016. And since then, in the past kind of 18 months of it being up and running properly, you can see the statistics on the right-hand side of the number of students and schools and registrations on Find an Apprenticeship and parents. So basically, the Apprenticeship Support and Knowledge for Schools programme is funded by the Department for Education through the National Apprenticeship Service. And what the National Apprenticeship Service do is they contract with 3 partners to deliver the ASK programme for them. So in the north, it's a company called BL Training, and they actually use a network of training providers to go into schools and deliver a package of support. In the Midlands, it's an organisation called Work Pays, who are linked with Get My First Job. And in the south, it's Inspiring the Future. So they're also known as Education and Employers. So the charity Inspiring the Future, and they cover London and the South. And again, Inspiring the Future have used pockets of training provider networks where they will engage with them to go into schools and help to subcontract some of this work through. The purpose of the ASK project is to support schools to increase their confidence and awareness around apprenticeships. So it's all about going in, offering assemblies, offering workshops, running teacher CPD sessions, and it's all about trying to support and plan with that school a programme of activities that's going to be able to support their students. So I would absolutely encourage you to get in contact with some of those organisations, whichever region you're in, and look for ways that you might be able to support them going into schools. The ASK programme as well, last week during National Apprenticeship Week, coordinated a campaign called 10K Talks, which you may have heard of. 10K Talks was all about getting talks to happen in schools about apprenticeships. And we engaged apprentices to go in with the delivery partners to deliver those sessions. So it was co-delivery. The ASK delivery partners will go in as apprenticeship experts, so they will explain about levels and the range of occupations, but the apprentices themselves will then bring that story to life. So it's useful to know about, because it could be that you go in and support as an expert delivery partner, or it could be that your apprentice could go in and accompany these partners into schools to talk about their experience of becoming an apprentice and to showcase the employer range of careers. But there are a number of other school programmes that are happening that you may know about. So the Careers and Enterprise Company, generally the Careers and Enterprise Company have got LEP-based coordinators who have then got a caseload of secondary schools that they will be working with in their particular area. And those secondary schools will be matched to enterprise advisors. So the enterprise advisors are representatives from business who will go in and work with a school strategically to try and plan some of their career activities. It would be interesting to know if any of your employers are enterprise advisors, because that's another link that you could be making. If any of your apprenticeship employers that you work with currently are going in with their careers and enterprise advisor hat on, then of course they could be introducing you as a training provider and helping to smooth that relationship. Then we've also got the National Careers Service, who have got the Inspiration Programme, DWP, so there are school advisors. There's probably over 100 school advisors who are based in the Department for Work and Pensions, who are also able to go in and support schools completely free of charge, and they are supposed to bring the labour market intelligence. So apprenticeships and non-apprenticeship vacancies, and be able to go into schools and talk to them about the range of opportunities. And then we've also got a range of activity happening through LEPs, through local authority, 14 to 19 teams, and of course our brilliant training provider network. So we've got more than 40 training provider networks who, just because we know it's a good thing, will organise events and activities where we can go in and talk to schools and speak to students and teachers about apprenticeships. So we're just going to pause there. I'm really interested to know if your organisation is already connected with those school programmes and if you're working with them. So if you could just quickly vote for me, please. So yes, fully, yes, partly, but could do more, no, or not sure. I'll give you a couple of minutes to just vote. So thank you. Hopefully we've got some votes coming in. And Jill's just going to share the results for us. There we go. So the majority in yes, partly, but could do more, and no. Okay, so hopefully that's a useful takeaway to kind of understand at least the range of programs that are out there and different ways in which your organisation might be able to connect with them following today. So let's look at some of the most effective techniques. And this is, I know this is kind of my opinion, but I think these are tried and tested techniques that really work. So first and foremost, leave the sales pitch to one side. So of course, if you are spending time and investing that time in going in to speak to school students, I think sometimes providers get a bit of a bad reputation for going in and just selling their wares or promoting the programs or the vacancies that they have. We also sometimes get accused of poaching students. That makes us sound terrible, doesn't it? But actually, that's not what's happening at all. But that possibly is how schools perceive it. So one of the ways to get around that is, first and foremost, leave the sales pitch to one side. Go back to the why. Why are we going in? One of the best things that you can do is identify a named contact or named contacts within that school and have a long-term strategy. Think where you want the relationship to get to in the next 3 years with that school. It's very rare that you'll see very instant results, as in you'll go into a school and give an assembly and a week later you've got 100 applications for one of your vacancies. We don't tend to see that happening. But what really does work is you becoming a trusted expert on apprenticeships and an advisor. So schools love having a go-to person, someone that they can speak to say, oh, I've got a student who's looking at this, could you point me in the right direction? Or have you seen any resources on that? You know, making yourself helpful to schools is a really useful thing. Then supporting events during the day and in the evening. So schools often feed back to us that obviously it's great to work with students during the day, but a lot of their staff CPD or parent events are in the evening. So being creative with the school to say, do you know what we could do? Or we've got an idea, like let's come up with something. But above all, be reliable. Don't cancel on them. Schools, a lot of you will know or will remember from your own experience of being in a school, it takes a lot for them to free up time on a timetable to be able to trust you to come in and speak to those students. So absolutely make sure that if you can't cover it for any reason, that you've arranged a backup so that you are seen as a really reliable source of apprenticeship knowledge, not only in the information you might be able to send them or talk to them, but also when you're presenting. Then on the previous slide, I said be creative. So how do you come up with a creative offer for schools? Well, I always find the best creative ideas are actually from speaking to the teachers themselves. So ask them what they need, ask them where their areas of concern are, and these do tend to shift throughout the year and throughout the seasons. So for example, teachers will often tell us that they are concerned about the new recruitment methods that seem to be coming in from some employers. So some employers will advertise on Find an Apprenticeship, which is brilliant, and we need more of that. We need to make sure that more employers are using FAA. But some employers will just advertise in their shop window or in a local newspaper, or it will just be word of mouth. So teachers can really struggle with how do we navigate that. And then also, if you're thinking about larger employers, where they have now quite varied recruitment practices that could include a video interview or an assessment day, or or even perhaps completing tasks and activities alongside other apprentices, being observed, you know, all of that stuff, they can get quite concerned about it. The other new thing that I think seems to be coming through is particularly larger employers having an opening date for their vacancy, but not necessarily having a closing date. And their message seems to be, we'll close when we're happy that we've got a big enough pool of good quality applications. So for schools getting their heads around that, you know, that is just an example of, if you speak to teachers, they'll start to come up with ideas of things that they feel their students would benefit from, or their teachers would benefit from. Then you can help to co-design the sessions. So it's really good, rather than saying, right, I'm just going to come in and do an assembly for you, or I'll run a workshop, get them involved in it, get them invested in your time as well. Be forward thinking and innovative. So think about the technology that you might be able to use, or look at the resources that are out there. They don't even have to be your resources, but kind of being able to signpost them to so much video content on YouTube, for example. You could use existing resources for inspiration as well. So the copy of the guide that I've put there on the right hand side is one that's on our website on amazingapprenticeships.com, and it's called 101 Amazing Apprenticeship Activities for Schools. In that, we literally have got 101 activity ideas for schools to run with their students, to run with their teachers, and to run with their parents. And so if you're thinking, well, I don't even know where to start being creative, you could use that guide as a starting point. So you could download it and kind of work with the school to pick out a few activities that you think might work best. Absolutely, our golden thread at the moment is using apprentices and employers themselves to inspire the audience. So as much as you going in, or even taking in an apprentice from your own organisation, is really powerful, if you can look at your network of apprentices and see how you might be able to use them to go in and speak, if you do that matching piece where you look at your apprentices and the schools that they used to go to, and whether the school would be interested in receiving a talk from one of your apprentices, then obviously we want the focus to be on their story. But because they're having such a brilliant time, they're obviously going to mention the training provider that they're with and how fantastic you are. So it is added PR, but in a kind of sideways, subtle way. And the other thing for schools is you need to make it really easy for them. So if you want them to get something out to parents, pre-writing it for them and just highlighting the bits that they might want to personalise themselves can be really effective. And often schools will include stuff in parent mail or in newsletters, but they much prefer it if you've done some of that hard work or the thinking for them, and they can just adapt it or cut and paste it. So I thought it would be useful to look at understanding candidate attraction as well. So this information is taken from a survey last year with Total Jobs, and it just shows us all ages, not just young people, but all ages, the things that are most important to them. And if you look at the first top few, salary, of course, is useful. Career development and progression. A lot of the young people that I speak to, and we go out and do sixth form focus groups all the time, they definitely want to know that by undertaking an apprenticeship that they're not putting any kind of limit on their career progression. And where am I going to be in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time? They absolutely want to know about the perks and the benefits. And this is in addition to holiday pay, sick pay, having a pension. You know, students will take that as a norm. What are the perks and benefits that that particular employer or range of employers might be able to offer? And if you're working with a lot of small businesses who perhaps might not have this, then focusing on the NUS Apprentice Extra card, which of course has got a huge amount of benefits for students, that can be a really good way. Great office culture and location. These definitely will be of importance to young people because they want to know what it's going to be like. Am I going to be the only youngest person in that office? Where do I eat my lunch? Who am I going to be sat next to? What's my desk going to look like? You know, there's really, we may possibly take it for granted that those are important things that are going to play on the apprentice's mind or future apprentice's mind. And of course, location. Am I actually going to be able to get there every day on time? And then probably the next list, they're less interested in around flexible working options, work-life balance. Training and development is quite far down on the list, but I definitely know from speaking to students, particularly around higher and degree apprenticeships, that the university provider of a degree apprenticeship really does matter for them. And interestingly, one focus group, and it was only one of them that came up with this, but one of them said, if the university is perceived to be a lower quality university, then they felt that the total employer offer would need to be significantly better. So they would want to see, you know, in however many years' time, you'll be entitled to apply for a company car, or on day one, you'll get given a mobile phone and a laptop. You know, stuff like that is what they're telling us is really important. So hopefully that's useful. And then the next one, I don't think you probably need me to tell you this, but 89% of job search is now undertaken using a mobile friendly device. So using either a laptop or a tablet or an iPhone or a smartphone. So again, trying to look at how that might come into any activities or sessions that you deliver with the school, and how that could link back to perhaps your website or the application process could be a really useful thing. Okay, so I promised to tell you about the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network, and I think this is one of the biggest secrets, well, not secrets, it's kind of just growing, but it's one of the most untapped areas from a training provider point of view. So back in November at the Skills Show, Anne Milton, Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships, launched the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network. The purpose of the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network is to formalise the structure across the country. So previously, we've had some really good groups happening in the North East and the East Midlands, but it hasn't been consistent across the country. So we now have 9 regions that an apprentice can apply to be part of the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network. They call it YAAN for short, Y-A-A-N. But basically, these will be collections of young people aged 18 to 26 in the main. By exception, people who are over 26 might still be able to join. Under 18s currently can't join because of safeguarding, but I think the National Apprenticeship Service are looking at this. So each of the 9 regions has a chairperson, and Simeon, who you can see in the photo there, Simeon, and he also presented at the Apprenticeship Awards, he presented at the Apprenticeship Diversity Champions Network last Wednesday at the House of Commons. Simeon is the chair for the East Midlands, for example. So the chairs and the vice chairs that have been put in place are really proactive and are desperately trying to grow the number of young apprentices that they've got within their networks. Alongside that, it also links with the ANN, the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network. So the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network is employers, and the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network is apprentices. The idea with the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, and we've just got a new chair of the National AAN, Jason Holt, who you will probably remember from the Holt Review a few years ago, but of Holt's group as well, really famous for jewellery. Jason Holt has just taken up position. So he's going to be stimulating and driving up the employer side of things, whilst we're going to be trying to use the apprentices to fire up the side of going into schools. I really think this is the thing that's going to make a huge difference, because we know that when apprentices go in and speak to other young people, and even better if we can get them to go back to the school that they went to, that it has a massive impact in repositioning apprenticeships as a credible choice. There's also a film that's been created by the National Apprenticeship Service that explains the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network. So there is no limit to the number of apprentices from your particular training organisation or business who can sign up to the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network. And it would be brilliant if you could encourage them to go along, because obviously, like I said earlier, it's a chance for them to talk about the fantastic experience that they're having, and you as their brilliant training provider or employer. So let's just do another quick poll. So did you know about the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network before today? So if we can just launch that one quickly, please, Jill. Yes, no, or not sure? And I won't be surprised if we get quite a high percentage of no. I'll be delighted if we get a high percentage of yes. So we'll get Jill to share that in a few minutes. The Young Apprentice Ambassador Network, the application process is actually really simple. Oh, okay, brilliant. So we've got 41% and just over half saying no. So if we can get you to take that information back today, that's a really good thing. The other thing I need to say about the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network and the activities is once they sign up, they get to go on a one-day training programme that the National Apprenticeship Service pay for. and they organise the delivery of that. So that's really focused on presentation skills and being able to confidently put across their story and the most important bits of their story. I actually think that could contribute towards 20% off the job hours. That's me joining it up with my other kind of network hat and kind of thinking of my providers. But also when the apprentices are then preparing their story and then taking it into school and delivering it, I think that should all be contributing as part of the apprenticeship programme and will really help towards developing some of those competencies and behaviours within the standard, but also explaining the benefits to their employer about the PR. So brilliant if you can take that away today. Right, let's go on. So another few ideas now that I'd like to share with you that I've seen really work. So one of the things, bringing them the wow factor. So I'm really passionate about this, and I don't think we've really seen enough of it yet, but around packaging levels. So a lot of young people in schools get put off at the thought of going on to a level 2 or a level 3 apprenticeship. And where some employers have been able to really shift perception around this is by joining up with other providers to offer a degree apprenticeship. Now, the wiring behind the scenes might still be that they come in and need to do 2 years on an advanced apprenticeship and then 4 years on a degree apprenticeship. But if you add 4 and 2 together, you've got a 6-year programme. You could call it a degree apprenticeship programme. And that was actually cleared by ESFA a number of years ago when degree apprenticeships first started getting talked about. Because the ultimate goal would be a degree apprenticeship, then the learner, the student, their family, and the employer might feel like they are heading towards something bigger. So I think that could be quite an easy thing, potentially, that we could put in place. And another couple of quick things. Have you asked your staff to look at which secondary schools they've got a personal connection to? And just a very quick mapping piece. Because without a doubt, I think staff who have got relatives or children in a local secondary school will feel kind of inclined to want to support them and perhaps have that personal connection. But it will also give you a really interesting map of perhaps schools that you haven't got a connection to. And another trick that I've seen is where training providers have actually tried to ensure that their staff get onto governing bodies of local secondary schools to be able to influence the apprenticeship conversation from within. So obviously that's quite an investment, again, in your time, but could be an idea that you might be interested in. Few others to share with you. The Teacher Apprenticeship Expert Programme. So this is something that I've seen delivered across the country in lots of different ways, really. But one of the things that we did in Luton a number of years ago was we set up a programme like this, and it was a 4-week programme, 2 hours per week, and we identified the careers leader or a subject lead to come out and become an apprenticeship expert. And this is what it looked like. So in week 1, we did some classroom-based work where we repositioned apprenticeships. So basically, we got them all together. We actually used the Chamber of Commerce to bring them on site, so they felt like they were going somewhere quite different. And we gave them the nuts and bolts of apprenticeships, what the levels are, the standards, how it's changed, how it is changing in the future. Then weeks 2 and week 3, we took them out to meet employers. So it was a 2-hour visit where we would ask an employer to put on a cup of tea and a biscuit, and we'd get the teachers all together and we'd get them to meet maybe in the conference room. They would hear from the employer, they'd get to hear from a couple of apprentices, and they'd have a tour of the facilities. So what we did was, usually I would use a big name to hook them in for visit 1. So perhaps somewhere like Warner Brothers or Vauxhall, or, you know, a big well-known name. But then on employer visit 2, because we'd already engaged them by then and they were kind of brought into the programme, we would then take them to a smaller employer so that they could see, even though they probably had never heard of that company before, all of the brilliant opportunities that those apprentices were being given, and how actually as teachers they could start to look at where smaller employers might be better for some of their students. Because again, I think sometimes the big names and the big brands can attract the volumes of applicants, and our smaller employers get missed. And actually loads of our smaller employers have really brilliant schemes, and so this is a way of getting them to see it and feel it. And then week 4 is again classroom based, big mop up, giving them loads of resources to take back to their schools, and the shift in perception and the shift in confidence as well with those teachers. Now that's quite a convoluted, probably not fair, but it's quite a long program and it's quite a commitment from schools. Actually, you could just do an employer visit. So you could be saying to the employers that you're working with, is there any chance that you would open your doors and we could invite some of our local teachers in to meet with you? Or do you have an open day where we could get them to come in? I also did one a few weeks ago in January where we took teachers. We said to teachers, right, you can have 1 teacher and 5 students. And we took them behind the scenes at the Treasury office in London. And it was brilliant. So we had 5 schools, so just 5 teachers in the room and 25 students. And we were so lucky that we had the Chancellor next door giving his kind of briefing to all of the staff. Now, we didn't get to meet him, but we did get the permanent secretary coming in and speaking to the students, which was such an amazing opportunity. And then we got a tour of the facility, so they got to see behind the scenes at the Treasury office, and you got to see the first red briefcase. And, you know, I'm not saying that every employer is going to be able to give that kind of level of excitement, but with just a bit of effort, it's not that difficult to get teachers and students out to be able to experience apprenticeships firsthand. And of course, they need to hear from apprentices throughout the day as well as employers. Then employers and parents. So I said about schools as a route to parents. Now, we know from all of the research that we've done with parents, they really trust schools and they trust the opportunities that schools present to them. So this was an example of a school in Hemel Hempstead where we did a kind of meet the employer event. And literally, you can see it on the screen. There were round table activities, and we asked different employers to host a table. And then we invited parents in and we let them sit down and have a kind of group speed meeting with those employers for 15 minutes. And the employer would do a very quick kind of 5 or 6 minutes. This is what our program looks like. And then the parents were able to look into the whites of the employer eyes and say, okay, so I'm worried that this is going to happen, or I'm worried that there might not be a job at the end, or what do you pay, or what happens if it goes wrong? And you were able to give employers and parents that dialogue face to face under the safety of the school sports hall. So the school had invited the employers. It was brilliantly attended and really fantastic. And yeah, it was quite a lot of work to organise, but it really did have impact because, again, this is about making sure that when students walk away from whatever input, whatever activity you've developed for them, that they then know what to do next. And by bringing parents in as part of that, parents can then support them with their applications, their the recruitment process, the interviews. Getting rejected, is something that young people do need support with. And if they don't get that first job, how to have someone in the background motivating them and stirring them up and trying to pick them up and get them to submit another application. So that's why parents are really important as part of the mix. And you can ask schools to help you as well. So once you've got a really good relationship with one, ask them to recommend you to other schools. Ask them for a slot at Parents' Evening, post 16, post 18. I love going and doing the higher education talks in schools. And what's really interesting is where I used to be given a sympathy slot at the end of the presentation often. So I'd get 10 minutes to talk about apprenticeships when they'd already had 50 minutes on HE and UCAS. That's shifting now, and much more it's kind of a 50-50. They hear about UCAS and they hear about apprenticeships. Ask them to support how good you are, so possibly by endorsing a project or providing a quote that you could use on social media. Ask them to help you to spot opportunities. So that comes back to the creativity piece. Offering teacher CPD, most schools around now and into the early summer will be putting their plans in place for the 18-19 academic year and planning what their CPD might look like. So I think as providers, you could be offering teacher CPD awareness sessions. You could offer, if you dare, to go in and talk about the apprenticeship levy and school workforce piece as well. I say if you dare because obviously the complexities around levy arrangements with schools can be quite daunting. And let's go on to our top tips. So my key top tips would be have a strategy and a plan in place with targets, timescales and impact measures. So if you're going to go into doing school engagement, think through who are we trying to contact, why are we doing it, and what impact would we expect to see, and how can we measure if the money and the time that we're investing into those school relationships is having that impact. Connect with existing school programs to help to maximise your effort. Really do think about who you're sending in to link with the school. So is the person that you're sending in for that initial conversation with the school able to look broadly at the programme? Are they experienced enough to be able to pick up on all the different nuances of the apprenticeship landscape? And are they going to come up with something that's quite dynamic and exciting for the school? Definitely encourage your apprentices to join the Young Apprentice Ambassador Network. Influence from within, so that's kind of getting yourself onto the governing body or PTA, or even just using your staff who have got an existing connection to that school. And above all, be creative and have some fun with it, because I think it's such a rewarding area for providers to get involved in. So I have talked on and on and on, so thank you so much for listening so patiently. We're now going to hand over to Matt, who's going to handle some Q&A. So please do type in your questions into the chat box if you've got any questions for us. Matt, I think you're back online now.
I am indeed. So there's a question that's come in. Are there any online resources to support schools?
Yes, there are. So there's kind of a myriad of resources to support schools. If I talk about Amazing Apprenticeships, so on the amazingapprenticeships.com website, there is a resources button, and literally it's full of guides, videos, posters. All of the content that's been developed has been developed for teachers. So there's loads of stuff on there, but you'll know all of the other kind of the usual suspects. So kind of not going to uni, Careers Hub, there's so many out there, so many different careers resources. The TES, Times Educational Supplement, even have a resources section, but the ones that we've developed are on Amazing Apprenticeships. And that's also on the Amazing Apprenticeships is where schools can go on and request support. So there's now a kind of a centralised national place where we market to them a lot, trying to get them to book their support in. Okay.
Thank you, Anna. You mentioned that schools will have to publish a career strategy by September. Who is going to check that they do this?
Yeah, we're not entirely sure yet. I've been keeping my ear to the ground on this. I think ultimately there's a bit of pressure coming through that people think Ofsted should take up the responsibility of checking it, and they probably will because it's mandatory and statutory even, but yeah, I think that's still to be confirmed. At the moment, it's more, the focus is more on making schools aware of their responsibility and what they have to have in place, and then probably as we get into September we might get more guidance around actually who's going to police it and make sure that it's happened.
Excellent. As a provider, if we want to get involved in the Ask programme, how would we do this?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, you would need to contact one of those 3 delivery partners. So if you're in the North, BL Training; if you're in the Midlands, WorkPays; and if you're in the South, then it would be Inspiring the Future, who are also known as Education and Employers. What I can do is send or arrange to send out with Joe contact details for each of those 3 delivery partners so that they can talk to you about how you might be able to get involved. But definitely there is a willingness, and because it's the National Apprenticeship Service behind this programme as well, they really want that connection with training providers to come through, training providers and your apprentices and your employers. So we'll make sure that Joe's got those contact details for you.
You touched on it a bit, but I've been told that it's really difficult to get into schools because they don't want us to poach their students. Is this still a truth? Is this still happening?
Yeah, you see, I hear it every so often, but then when I actually say to people, okay, so when was the last time that you actually tried to contact a school? It feels like sometimes it's more of an urban myth than it is a personal experience. And I think some of it is around the approach as well. So making sure that you're not just saying kind of, can I come in and talk to your students about our programs, but how can we help you? You know, we want to support you with the apprenticeship dialogue. So what could we do that would be useful? In my experience, we've always had a really positive reception from schools if it's pitched right. But I kind of appreciate that particularly colleges may find a slightly different relationship at the moment. But that's entirely why the Baker Clause has been brought in, to try and mitigate some of those issues. But I think it's around giving schools confidence as well. When I used to, if I ever felt any resistance from schools, then I would say, look, I'm definitely not going to poach your students, and how would you like me to focus the conversations? And if they said, well, look, you really need to focus it on the importance of completing your exams but getting prepared for apprenticeships, could you do that? Then absolutely. And that was something, you know, in liaison with them, so that they felt less threatened. They felt that they had a bit of ownership of the content of your presentation.
Excellent. Is there any limit to the number of apprentices that can be put forward to sign up for the YAAN?
No, not yet. No, I imagine when we kind of start tipping 1,000, they might start to look at the spread of apprentices. But so far, geographically, we've got a really good spread. Diversity-wise, we've got a really good spread as well. So we've got a good range of levels of apprentices, genders, sectors, ethnicities. You know, it's kind of really diverse without even really trying. So yeah, definitely no limit. Go for it, put them forward. It would be great to have them signing up.
Excellent. Got a question here. As a provider, we have received various invites from schools as opposed to contacting them to let us in to avoid the mentality of poaching. Should we start taking the initiative to get in?
Yeah, definitely. So if schools are approaching providers, was that, Matt?
Yes. So we've received various invites from schools.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, get involved, I would say. I mean, that's kind of a brilliant gift, isn't it? If a school is contacting you to say, can you help us? And the conversation the kind of discussion you need to be having is, okay, so if we're going to do this, and if schools are going to be asking us to spend our time, what's the impact that we would expect to see? So what's the return on investment? Because it is expensive to go into school and have your staff released, and the coordination time as well. So I would just say, be mindful of what you want that return on investment to be. And if it's just to make some noise and raise awareness of your brand, then that's great. You know, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. But if you're actually looking for results in terms of starts on programs, then yeah, so just to consider all of that, I would say.
Excellent. And do the YANs get their travel reimbursed if they go out to events?
I don't think so currently. Although I do know that the AAN, the Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, so that's the employers, have been given some budget by the National Apprenticeship Service to make things happen in their local areas. So they've been given a pot of money. Now, it could be that because the YAN chair and the AN chair are supposed to talk to each other quite regularly, it could be that we start to see that come through, and that some kind of budget might be made available in the future. But currently, there is no formal arrangement for reimbursing travel costs, I'm afraid.
Excellent. Schools are contacting us, but only to meet year ones. They clearly don't want us to meet their sixth formers. Will the Baker Clause insist on broader access?
Yeah, the Baker. So I think that's supposed to say year 11s, because year ones is quite young. I'm all up for primary school engagement, but I think...
yes, sorry. It does say year one, but yeah, so that year 11.
Yeah. So yes, schools are supposed to be putting forward a policy on how you can engage it with students from years 8 to 13. So I think year 11 is a good place to start. We know the nervousness around sixth form, and I think that's only going to get bigger with T levels when they kind of really start to kick in and all of that. But I think start with year 11s if that's the only place you can get in, and then once you're in and they can see what a brilliant job you are doing and how trusted you are and what an expert you are, you will quickly see that expand to the sixth formers. Usually what happens is you start with year 11s, then they'll give you the sixth form wobblers, in my experience. So kind of January, February time, they'll come to you and say, I've got a group of students who I'm really worried are going to drop out. And then after probably another year, then you start to get access to the full range of sixth form students. Promoting higher and degree apprenticeships is a really good hook as well for schools, because they really don't understand higher and degree apprenticeships. And we know as providers that apprentices don't always start as a higher or degree apprentice. And and it will depend on the job role, and it will depend on the apprenticeship standard and minimum requirements and all of that. But to say, yeah, brilliant, okay, I'll come in and I'll talk about degree apprenticeships, and then when you're actually in there, you can talk about everything else and the steps to get towards a degree apprenticeship. That can be a really good hook for the school as well. And often they will just ask for degree apprenticeship information or higher and degree apprenticeship information because they don't understand. A lot of teachers don't understand the stepping stones that might be needed to get up to that level. So that would be my tip.
Excellent. Well, that I think pretty much, I think we've completed on the questions. If there's obviously any other questions that either come to people's mind between now and any time after this, then you can submit those questions. But I'd like to thank Anna for your time today, and thank you for bringing very engaging subject. And
Pleasure.
like you say, there's going to be plenty of opportunity, I think, over the next a short while to actually really get into this. And I think there's some really good resources and links there for people to review and engage as well. Thank you for everyone attending today's webinar for Working Creatively to Engage Learners Through Schools. Like I say, if you've got any other questions, then do contact our events team at AELP. Once you leave today's webinar, a survey about the webinar will appear on screen. We would be very grateful if you could just spare a minute to complete the survey. And the scoring system is 1 equals excellent and 5 equals poor. So the opposite of maybe the lower number is the better and the higher number is not the better. You will then receive a follow-up email, usually within 48 hours, with a link to a view of the recording of today's webinar, along with the view to a PDF of the slides, which I know has been asked as well. So on behalf of AELP and of Anna, thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.